All right, all right, all right. You started out this premier train with Will's Treasure and then went over and checked out Silver Bull 30. What's up, bully? Now you're with me, Frostbite Coins and Collectibles. After me, we're going to head on over and check out the conductor, the one, the only, Mr. Mad Stacker. From there, we are going to jaunt on over and we're going to say hi to the gold sniping farmer. There we're going to jaunt and say hi to a everyday opportunity. Good to have you on board. We're going to go see our brother, Mr. Ringmaster Ray, and we're going to wrap it up with the one, the only, pistol packing pirate. Welcome aboard, all. Hey, good day, ladies and gentlemen. This is Frostbite, and again, we're going to go into my Plains on Coins. Well, today's not really a coin. It's actually a silver bar that's made by the Madison Mint. Now, it has a great depiction of the Spirit of St. Louis. You'll see in this image on the right all of the details about the plane. You can find this along with links from the photos that I'm going to be showing you down in the description below. So go check that out. It's the National Air and Space Museum along with the Smithsonian. So the Spirit of St. Louis, beautiful plane, aeronautical history. It's just, there's so much about this particular plane that I absolutely love. Now in 2015, the Spirit of St. Louis went underneath a massive construction effort. And it was because of the hall that it was in was experiencing a giant renovation. Now, as this renovation began, they were able to take a very close look inside this amazing aircraft. Now, I'm going to be sharing some images with you. And again, as I stated before, the link is in the description. These are all property of the National Air and Space Museum, but I wanted to share them with you because some of them are absolutely fabulous. Now, during the restoration, the museum officials, workers, and even a few select guests were able to see, inspect, and locate, photograph some of this amazing aviation history. The museum opened in 1976, and a sister of the Spirit of St. Louis had been suspended from the ceiling for about 40 years. Now, as workers renovated the hall, restorers from the various museums got to document, clean, and carefully photograph the plane. Now, they painstakingly focused on the minute details, even the little curiosities about the plane that had been long forgotten, like names that had been etched into the plane or the fuselage, or the people who were standing guard when it landed in France, writing their name in it. A lot of these things have been completely forgot and lost to history. Now, the plane, which bears the number Ryan NYP NX211, is much better known for its stage name, the Spirit of St. Louis. Now, the general makeup of the plane is made up of light wood metal construction. However, there are a few different materials in this plane that a lot of people are really aware of. Number one, the fuselage is made primarily from a meshed cotton fabric. That and the tail section are primarily the same materials. But the wings are composed of something different. Now, the wings are what brought two nations together. And we'll talk about that here in a few minutes, but they were made from a French linen. So again, I want you to pay attention to this because this is something that's going to come up and play an important role. After all, during this epic flight, where did they land? Paris, France. Now, how many people know why the plane is affectionately known or called the Spirit of St. Louis? Well, I'm going to go over that a little bit, and I'm going to talk about that and how, because of key stakeholders and some powerful aeronautic players, a lot about networking and a little bit of teaching, people who resided in St. Louis, Missouri, financial backers, businessmen, aficionados, aerospace engineers, and the like, who would run into Charles Lindbergh, would end up being able to come together and pull off an amazing feat. Now, Charles Lindbergh wanted to enter a race. Now, this race had a prize of $25,000 for completing the task. What was this race? Well, a single cross-continental flight from New York to Paris, France. Now, Charles Lindbergh met with a couple people. Now, we're going to be talking about some members of aviation regarding this particular one. But again, when you're looking at this particular flight, you have to remember this had never happened before. This had never been accomplished. And so this was meant to kind of look at things they knew. This is going to have to challenge aviation. They were going to have to look at design and reorder some of the items to even get the flight to stand a chance for crossing the Atlantic from New York to Paris. Now, Charles Lindbergh understood that the future of aviation depended upon this, and they would have to turn this plane upside down. There would have to be some technological advancements, improvements in airplane engine efficiency, weight, design, and of course, it would require financing. Now, this is where Missouri and a famous field called Lambert Field would come into play. See, Charles Lindbergh taught at Lambert Field. And some of the men he taught, the businessmen, the aficionados, the attorneys, different people of that realm, were all influencers and supporters. These were primary men like Earl Thompson, Albert Bond Lambert. And these people were the ones that he would go to and kind of work with these famed people. Now, if you've ever heard of Mr. Lambert had dealings with another famous aeronautical duo, and that was the famed Wright brothers. Now, there were a lot of discussions about the technical build and what should happen and all these things. And ultimately, Charles Lindbergh kind of turned down two primary features. Number one was a dual engine build that was requested. He said, if the engine fails, you're in the water, you're going to be lost to sea. Lindbergh said, nope, I want it. I have an idea for the design. I want to use a plane like the one I use in barnstorming. And he settled upon one and met with a gentleman named Harry Knight. Now, Harry Knight was a wealthy stockbroker. He had acquaintance with, again, Lambert Field was very important in this role. And they put together a cost analysis, started looking at it, and along with some other donations that had been caused, they borrowed $10,500 and were on their way towards building this particular item. Now, they met with a number of people, but ultimately they settled on a plane that would be the M1 mail plane. Now, this was talked about. This was located in California, and the people who built this gave him an estimate of $6,000 and a short turnaround time of 60 days. Now, remember that this contest was already in play. It was already getting ready to do it. Pilots were already staged, getting ready to go to New York. They had already begun some of the processes, so he had a very tight turnaround. Now, Hall and Lindbergh worked very closely together. They checked the plane's balance, engines, cockpit. They made sure everything was perfectly managed. And on April 28th, as promised, right on time, they delivered and began test flights. Now, the first test flight that they took in this plane from California to St. Louis broke records. In 14 hours, 25 minutes, set an initial record on its initial primary flight. Him and his financial partners were ecstatic. They knew there was no time to celebrate. They needed him to get to New York because failure in that, not getting there in time, could result in them not being able to compete. So off to New York, and on May 12th, Charles Lindbergh would set off on his epic journey from New York to Paris. And on May 21st, 1927, Charles Lindbergh would coast across the skies of France on his way to Paris. Now, he landed to a mob of 120,000 spectators. And as you can see on the screen, you can see this massive mob waiting for them to open the door. They come flooding into the plane and absolutely arrived to a hero's welcome. Now, remember, in the beginning, I talked about the French fabric that was done in the wings. So the French had great national pride over the fact that these wings made of French material had carried Charles Lindbergh to safety. It was because of these wings and this design and the partnership between the United States and France that allowed for a successful trip. Now, Charles Lindbergh ultimately won that $25,000 prize and was able to meet now the gentleman that they stayed with at that night. There wasn't a whole lot of rest. Again, we're talking about mobs, 100,000 strong, clamoring all night into the next day, where they would meet the president. They would go to the official government buildings and say hi and wave their flags. And again, in mass, tens of thousands of people gathered to just kind of get a glimpse of Charles Lindbergh. Charles Lindbergh being a man who understood the political realm and being a avid icon, so to speak, would take time to serve as honored guest and would talk with people and visit and associate and wave the American as well as the French flag and just really share pride within the French way of doing things. Now, the plane was sitting still at Gosport Field. Now, the Spirit of St. Louis, they would look at it. You got to have some government leaders, some aficionados, some high-class businessmen, people in different things. I got to look at the plane. Again, it was under high scrutiny, high guard. But again, this is where those little things like the signatures on the fuselage would come into play. Now, the Spirit of St. Louis was dismantled by the Royal Air Force there at Gosport. It was crated and would be placed on board the cruiser, the USS Memphis, on its way back to the United States. It would land at Bowling Field, where it would be reassembled. And then on June 16th, it would make another record-breaking flight. Now, this short flight happened from Bowling Field to Mitchell Field, but they were both on Long Island. But again, set speed records for the quickest flight for that particular duration. All in all, the Spirit of St. Louis would fly 489 hours, 28 minutes, and a grand total of 174 flights. This is an amazing piece of American icon that wouldn't be matched again till the Apollo 11 moon landing in 1969. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and head on over to Mad Stackers, where we're going to continue this premiere train. I hope you've enjoyed this little planes on coins, well, planes on rounds, planes on bars discussion. Spirit of St. Louis, again, is an American icon. I hope you've enjoyed this. But again, as always, this is Frostbite. Have a wonderful day.